welcome to the Yahowah blog. We are here with the Wookiee and our library studio and continuing our series on the Antichrist as Wookiee gets a drink of green tea, one of his absolute favorites. He didn't drink that much of it this time, though, because it wasn't cold. And Wookiee likes his iced tea chilled. Well, the series that we continued last night is, of course, fascinating to many people because there has been no one really in the last few hundred years that has been sought after, not to embrace, but to know the identity of, more than this fellow that Christians have captured in their eschatology as the Antichrist. And while Christians are wrong in that there was no Christ, therefore they can't be Christians, it was nothing but a figment of Paul's twisted imagination as he performed a crime of identity theft by robbing David of his acclaim, his notoriety, and his achievements, and robbed everyone of eternal life as a result of this fraud. The fact is that there is a fellow that will become the corporeal manifestation of Hasatan, the adversary. He is spoken of throughout the Torah and the prophets, and particularly in Daniel and in Yahsha'yah, Isaiah. And this individual we have identified. His time is now. He comes to the forefront by betraying Israel. He is the one that Isaiah in the 17th chapter and Yahsha'yah, which would of Yahsha'yah, and then Daniel in the 9th chapter, which is actually spoken of by now I have a lake on my desk, but not to worry. Leah decided that Wookiee might be thirsty, and she was kind enough to give Wookiee a bowl of water. But Wookiee is just looking at, oh boy, you made a mess, Mom. And this is my perch now. But Gabriel, who is the one who is making the predictions, the heralding future events through Daniel to us in the 9th chapter, is speaking of himself when he refers to the Messiah, because he is the Messiah. And then he talks about one who is counter to him, who will arrive, this Towrahless one, this great betrayer of Israel, in just one sentence to the next, and positions him as really the corporeal manifestation of Satan. And he comes on the scene and is known for the same thing, for creating a treaty with many that destroys Israel's viability by giving terrorists the land of Israel. Now, this is now being orchestrated by Donald Trump, by MBS, by Macron, and they have many others that will be working with them, such that the ultimate vote in the United Nations will be about 90% in favor of rewarding the Muslims who perpetrated the atrocities of 10/7 with the state, which is why they did it. It's not because they want a state. They have no interest in a mythical place called Palestine, because there are no Palestinians, and of course they know it better than anyone. They did not shout Palestine Akbar when they perpetrated those crimes. They did not shout Hamas Akbar when they raped and pillaged their way through southern Israel. They shouted Allahu Akbar. And so the state that they wish to achieve is a total Islamic sweep all the way from the borders of India and Pakistan all the way to the western borders of Africa and Morocco, and down to the core of Africa and everything in between. And this would mean, of course, that they wish to annihilate Jews and replace Israel with a Islamic state. So because the prophets make it clear that this will happen at the celebration of Shabuw'ah. And there are 2 episodes of Shabuw'ah they point to. The first is upcoming in 9 months. That will be the Shabuw'ah that takes place on the Shabat of May 22nd, 2026, which would give a full 7 years for the time of Israel's troubles. And then the second one that meets the specific criterion of 2,300 days to it being the conclusion of the time of Israel's troubles on Towrah in 2033. That date then would be the 11th of June, 2027. And so there's 2 dates for Towrah. There's 3 events that will be transpiring at this time between May of 2026 and June of 2027. And that is the commencement of the time of Israel's troubles, the forfeiture of the heart of Israel to create a terrorist state that will lead to the destruction of Israel. And 3 is the harvest of the covenant family, so that they are removed from this terrible time. And those 3 events will transpire over these 2 celebrations of Shabuw'ah. But since that is occurring now, we have to recognize that the players are about to perform this feat. And indeed, actually, it's interesting. It's on Towrah this year that the United Nations is meeting for the express purpose of announcing this Palestinian state. And understand, there is no such thing as Palestine. It is a myth that was created in a genocidal fashion as a racist slur against Yahudah by the Roman Emperor Hadrian back in 133 CE, and it would have been forgotten because it was just designed to be a derogatory insult as Hadrian was torturing Jews to death. Had it not be for the Brits who decided that they would pick up on the racial taunt because, well, the Brits have always hated Jews. It's one of the reasons I'm actually enjoying watching the UK be destroyed by Islam. It is turnaround. It is proper recompense for England to be destroyed in the manner that they have championed against Israel. And so recognizing that this is the plan and that the Muslims have no interest in a Palestinian state, they have no interest in anything being Palestine. Their goal is to simply annihilate Israel and obliterate Jews so that they control everything as a colonial power from Morocco and that sea all the way to India. So with that occurring now, who do you think the prime mover is going to be? Because Isaiah is very clear. He describes the United States and Donald Trump. But so is Daniel, and we read the description yesterday of the arrogance and the duplicity and the sexual perversity of this man. And there really has never been, in modern times, a more sexually perverted, egotistical, dishonest, and duplicitous man that is anywhere near what we're witnessing in Donald Trump. And we found earlier in Daniel that the Donald Trump was also called out by his strange, goatish comb-over hair, the fact that he is very old, long in days, it was said, and that he is ultimately going to be so crippled by the time that these final events transpire, beginning now and really running all the way through 2033, that he'll be in a wheelchair by the time it's all over. Really gaudy looking wheelchair, according to the prophet. So this is what we're up against. And the testimony that God is providing, well, it stays right on theme and leaves everyone without excuse. After revealing that the chosen people will succumb, they are further forewarned. But we are already acknowledging that Trump is the confabulator of superlatives, confounding through chaos. A acknowledged sexual pervert. And he is going to be the great betrayer of Israel. And he's been bribed to do it. You know, the Saudi Arabians, the Qataris, and the Emir of the United Arab Emirates collectively have given him and his cohorts $16.5 billion. They used to be able to buy a president for, well, back in the days of Billy Beer, for Jim Akata to become an anti-Semite, it was about $400,000. And then with George Bush and Obama, it was between 15 and 20 million in speaking fees. But now, yeah, well, the Donald, he's shrewd. It cost $16 billion to bribe him, but he's going to be the worst president that Saudi Arabia ever bought, and will pay his debt to his benefactors by sacrificing Israel. And that is on the immediate horizon. And it says, and by way of his cunning and his interpretations and sly explanations, through his craftiness and cleverness, he will become a powerful and influential force for deceit and deception, deliberately and successfully misleading and betraying. He will prosper, even thrive, by being treacherous and dishonest, providing false impressions, along with a beguiling perspective, using subtlety to delude. With his actions and in his inclinations, he will boast that he is praiseworthy, the greatest ever. Through complacency and with surprisingly little effort and no empathy, he will manipulate, morally incapacitate, corrupt, and destroy thousands, countless individuals. He will ravage and pervert the masses, destroying the multitudes in a humiliating fashion, ensnaring, entrapping, and bearing vast numbers of people. He will present himself as superior to and take a stand against the king's foremost representative. But in the end, he and his influence will be broken, and his hand will be crushed. Daniel 8:25. Well, ladies and gentlemen, when you put the facts together, it's impossible to deny this is Donald J. Trump. It is like the person providing this information, who I know quite well. His name is Michael. He was asked by Gabriel, who was Dode, to provide this testimony at this time. Michael means one who is right about God. He has described Donald Trump to the T. And again, I want to frame the issue here. We know this is Donald Trump because of what the great prophet wrote in Isaiah. Isaiah 17 and 18 vividly depict the thinning of Israel, making Israel indefensible, in conjunction with the fulfillment of Shabuw'ah, which is the upcoming harvest. The next one, the one that allows 7 years for the time of Jacob's troubles, that is described throughout the prophets, is the 22nd of May, 2026. And we're told that in the subsequent chapter of Isaiah, recognizing there were no chapter breaks in the great Isaiah scroll, just a continuing discussion, that the nation responsible for doing this is one that is noticed for its buzzing wings, its helicopters and drones. That is the nation that is best known for sending ships around the sea to project its power. The nation that is the most meddling in the affairs of the world. A nation who is exceedingly arrogant, condescending, manipulative. And the nation that has an enormous influence over Israel so that it's in a position to betray Israel with an exceedingly arrogant leader. You don't have to be a genius to figure out who that is. Because the Shabuw'ah is now. We are just 8 years now, less than 8 years from Dod and Yahweh's return, which means the Shabuw'ah harvest for a 7-year time of, not the Shabuw'ah harvest, the Shabuw'ah Moed, the Mikra of Shabuw'ah, the next one, which will designate the beginning of the time of troubles, is the one in May of 2026. I think that the Shabuw'ah harvest will be the following year in June 11th, a Shabat also, in 2027. But this agreement is going to transpire in the next 9 months. And matter of fact, it's going to be positioned in the next month. And so the country that will either cause that to be official or not, now or a few months from now, is the United States. And so there is no question that the U.S. is the perpetrator and that Donald Trump is the sitting president of the United States that will make this happen. The prophets have never been wrong. This is what they have claimed. You can read it in the great Isaiah scroll. There it is for all to see. And then you have Gabriel, who is Dod, God's most capable and courageous man, in the very prophecy in which he is announcing the specific day that he will fulfill Chag Matzah, Pesach Matzah and Bakurim, in 33 CE. He is announcing that there will be an adversary that will be vicious towards him, a false Messiah. And that he will come onto the world scene most adroitly pursuant to Israel with the confirmation of a treaty with many regarding the forfeiture of Israeli land, the two-state solution. So the time is now. The country is clearly identified. And now, on top of that, you read the following. After the previous statement says that he's going to be a sexual pervert, that he is going to be duplicitous, that he is going to be exceedingly arrogant, and that he's going to have no empathy, which describes Donald Trump to a T, we read the following, that he is cunning in his interpretations and sly explanations. Trump turns everything upside down. Oh, the Epstein files, they're nothing but a hoax, right? I'm so mad at Putin, even though the United States is responsible for that war. Everything's upside down. His best bud, the guy that kept him out of jail and the reason that he's in the White House, Elon Musk, he denounced. He has his own interpretation for everything. He had 4 economic deals that he announced, none of which were true. He claimed to have ended a war between Pakistan and India when the Indians said, no, he didn't talk to us and he had nothing to do with it. So he is cunning in his interpretations. He is sly in his explanations. He is crafty and clever. And he will become a powerful, this was spoken in 555 BCE, so 2,600 years ago. So it was saying that he will become a powerful and influential force for deceit and deception. Now I can say it in the present tense. He has become a powerful and influential force for deceit and deception. There has never been a more deceitful leader of a country. I mean, Trump lies more often than he tells the truth. I mean, he mixes in a few truthful statements just to make his lies seem more appealing. It twists everything. He is a master of deceit and deception. And this says, doing so deliberately, attempting to mislead and betray. He is the great betrayer, not only of America, but of Israel, of the world. I mean, he just announced that he's changing the Department of Defense into the War Department. Well, it's the Department of Defense when you're trying to protect your country. It's a War Department when you're trying to project your power through military force to impose your will on others. It's obvious what he's saying. Why isn't everybody listening? He's projected his War Department on American cities, Los Angeles, for example, and now the nation's capital. Soon there'll be others, Boston, Philadelphia, ultimately Chicago, New York. He's following Hitler's playbook. He is, we're told in the previous statement, he'd be an autocrat, a dictator. And he is. With his actions and his inclinations, by his hand and by his heart. He's going to boast that he is praiseworthy, the greatest ever. There has never been, in the history of modern nations, and maybe even going back into ancient times, there has never been a more egotistical leader. And if you listen to one of his cabinet meetings, the whole cabinet meeting is about person going one after another to kiss Donald Trump's ring, to kiss him on his tush, to tell him how great he is. And then he goes off and he tells everybody how great he is. There has never been a more boastful leader of a nation ever that has claimed that he's the best at everything, absolutely the greatest ever, when he's the worst ever. This is what any rational, moral, informed person that isn't blinded by politics would see. Through complacency and with surprising little effort and empathy, he'll manipulate, morally incapacitate, and corrupt and destroy countless individuals. That's exactly what he's done. He's got 77 million MAGAs incapacitated, such that they look at a man who is a pedophile, who is a rapist, who is a thief, who accepts bribes that are counter to his nation, who lies with every breath, who has made an absolute mockery of the nation's economy and its currency and its standing in the world. And they praise him as if this is what they voted for, showing him in messianic form. So he's going to manipulate and corrupt countless individuals. Many are going to die as the result of Donald Trump being demon-possessed and controlled by Satan. And he brought this on himself. He is not poor Donald, became demon-possessed. Donald accepted Satan willingly when he was down and out, nearly bankrupt, losing case after case, destined to spend the rest of his life in jail, disgraced. And he made a deal with the devil. And, the fact is, Satan has a type. You want to look at Satan's type, it'd be Muhammad, a sexual pervert just like Trump, a pedophile just like Trump, a rapist just like Trump, incestuous just like Trump, a man without empathy who's a psychopath just like Trump, a man who lies about what he is actually offering just like Trump, an egomaniac just like Trump. A man who recites everything and writes and reads nothing, just like Trump. He will present himself as superior to and take a stand against the leader's foremost representative. And in this particular case, you have to have some inside knowledge to understand this. The king of Israel, the only person that is important in this regard, is David. And from the beginning, according to Yahsha'yah in the 14th chapter, it isn't so much that Satan is so full of himself that he wants to be perceived above God. No, he wants to be far more destructive than that. He wants to be perceived as Elyon. And Elyon is Dod. It's all things pertaining to God's hand. And so he wants to be perceived the way the New Testament presents Jesus, as the replacement for the king, the replacement for the Messiah, the replacement for the Son of God, the replacement for the Savior. And so he wants to be seen as taking away, doing what Paul did, making Dod essentially dead and buried so that he can replace him and present himself as the Son of God. Now, to preclude that from prevailing, Yahweh has from the beginning authorized a man, a lesser luminary, to reflect the greater luminary's light. And it is the king's foremost representative, the Sharim, that is responsible for defending King Dod's reputation. And I will do so by taking a stand against the corporeal manifestation of Hasatan. I'm doing so right now as part of this program. I am attacking him. I am exposing and condemning both Hasatan, Satan, and the one that he has possessed in Donald Trump. You are witnessing the ongoing fulfillment of that statement. And in the end, this is all for the last of days. He and his influence will be broken and his hand will be crushed. What's going to happen here is that at the last day of the time of Israel's troubles, which is Towrah, the Shabat of September 24th, year 6000 Yah, which is 2033. I'm going to have the Malak who have protected me up to this point, and the seven spirits of Yahweh who have enabled and inspired me to all stand down. And Elia, who is my fellow witness, is going to summon the Donald and Satan, and they are going to do as they have said they would. It is written in Ezekiel, and Ezekiel speaks for Satan. They're going to celebrate what they call the Feast of the Beast, where my blood and flesh will be on the menu. And they're going to bludgeon me. and try to drink my blood and eat my flesh. And they may get a bite. They may get a swig, but it will kill them. It will be toxic to them, just as Yahweh's approach, which will ignite a fire and release waters under the sacrifice of the Adam of Parah, will purge his children of their religiosity so they can enter the millennial Shabat. It will also incinerate and destroy those who have come to harm Israel. And so it will be his end. That is his last day. He has a confirmed reservation in hell. I understand this, that POTUS sent out a call for all MAGAs to send him $15 so that he can be assured of going to heaven. What $15 per MAGA is going to do that would get him into heaven, I don't know what the correlation is. But, we're dealing with Donald Trump. There is no rational way to interpret anything he has to say. But I do know this. Donald Trump has a confirmed reservation in hell. And it will be fulfilled on the 24th of September on Towrah in 2033. And that will be the end of him. And will also be the end of the spirit that possesses him. So we are obviously not seeing the full scope of this union between Donald Trump and Halal bin Shakar, because the feeble-minded POTUS seems far less intelligent than a developmentally disabled bully in the third grade throwing sand in a sandbox. He can barely complete a sentence without tripping on his tongue, and is wrong far more than he is right. He is not even credible in his lies at this point, and he has a very tenuous grasp on reality. But maybe in today's world, where the education system has betrayed two generations and dumbed them down to the point that they can no longer think, and religions are impervious to evidence and reason, and that those who are overtly political will believe anything that their representative has to tell them and swoon at the feet that maybe being right no longer matters, and that billions will succumb in this regard. But when compared to Satan's most infamous prior projects, that would be Paul and Muhammad, both of whom openly acknowledged that they were demon-possessed. This man, who is the Coppercon, is no brighter than the worst of them. Also, Satan is going to, he's going to have to up his game to have any semblance here of cunning and craftiness, unless the world has just been dumbed down to the point that it really doesn't matter and it's a comparative figure. But when you read the Quran and Hadith that Muhammad delivered, it's too dumb for words. Just like Donald Trump, Muhammad didn't read. He was absolutely irrational. Everything he said, you just go, oh my God, this person is an egomaniacal psychopath. And there's absolutely no correlation between what he says and what's true. But more importantly, he is really a bloodthirsty pervert. And with Paul, he, in his last letter to Corinth, specifically announced that he was controlled and possessed by Satan. And his letter to the Romans, he admitted that he was a sexual pervert. He is, throughout his letters, claiming to be the most important person in the world, and that he is an egomaniac. So Satan clearly has a type. Donald Trump's his type. And as I've shared in previous shows, when you come to realize that the book of Ezekiel is Satan's playbook, his autobiography, and that the book concludes with chapter upon chapter of the Coppercon, a orangish colored man who is a real estate developer, measuring up a monstrosity for naming rights to bury all of the Temple Mount in Jerusalem under this monstrosity. That the Coppercon, this bronze man, is none other than Orange Man himself, Donald Trump. It's just, no matter where you turn, it's the exact same story. Now, as for deceit and deception, Satan has found the perfect patsy. There is essentially no correlation between what comes out of Trump's mouth and reality. No one has ever been better at misdirecting. He is really good at that. But it is in betrayal that he will leave his mark. The Messiah of MAGA is the next Neville Chamberlain, betraying Israel as if the world learned nothing really from the attempt to appease the Nazis by sacrificing Czechoslovakia. And while I'm tempted to say that his treachery will deliver the same result, it's not entirely fair, since this time the casualties will be numbered in the billions, not millions. After all, Trump is getting ready the nuclear, according to him, and he has just renamed the Department of Defense as an aggressive force of death, the War Department. Never, and I say this acknowledging the arrogance of Paul and Muhammad, the Caesars and kings, even Der Fuhrer, has there been a narcissist of Trump's caliber. He is crappy at everything except this one thing. In his mind and in those of the true believers, the Coppercon is the greatest ever. Make America great again. And so how does this man, who is so obviously incompetent, dishonest, sexually perverted, criminal, rise to a place where he can be so destructive and deadly? And the answer is just as Michael has explained here. Complacency. Ignorance. And Yahweh even laid it out in Hosea, which is speaking of our time, and it says, my people are destroyed because they're ignorant. Ignorance isn't bliss, it's deadly. Israel's lack of understanding about their enemy, being Islam, has been exceedingly destructive. Israel's ignorance of Yahweh is destructive. Too few people are thoughtful, moral, or even care. Apathy breeds ignorance, and Yahweh stated through Hosea, my people are destroyed for a lack of knowing. Oh, by the way, the interesting part of that is, what do you think the word is for knowing? It's dayat. What's the word for a tree of knowledge of good and evil? Dayat. What is the actionable root of dayat? Yada. What is the solution for ignorance then? For not knowing, would it not be the tree of knowledge? Then the tree of knowledge can now lead you back to the tree of lives, and the tree of lives is David, Gabriel, the Messiah and Son of God, who opened the door to life by fulfilling Passover. And the tree of knowledge is the guy that wrote all about him to direct your attention back to him, so that you might know Yahweh again and his beloved Son, our Messiah, his son, Dode. Something to think about, isn't it? Apathy for what should have been recognizable at least 10 years in advance of this time, and from 10,000 miles away. It's going to now lead to total moral incapacitation among the masses. I see it right now when I engage in social media. People can no longer think. They have no moral compass anymore. There is just such a small section of people who are open-minded, thoughtful, rational, that genuinely care about the things that Yahweh had to say. But the vast majority of people, no matter what you say, they can't even process it. We're looking at total moral incapacitation among the masses worldwide. And this is largely true because what wasn't already destroyed by the overtly religious, because in religion, it is a belief system, and all knowledge and explanations that are incompatible with that belief system are routinely rejected. And so religion is impervious to evidence and reason. But now there is a religion that is even more destructive on destroying a person's ability to exercise good judgment than Christianity, Judaism, or Islam, or Hinduism. And that's Marxism. And Marxism now is exceedingly popular again among the last two generations, to the point that they really have been incapacitated. They have no moral compass. They have forfeited the use of their nasama, which is a conscience, which is the only thing that differentiates humans from other animals. They have ceased to be even humans. They're the ones marching in the streets saying, death to Israel and Palestine will be free of Jews, which is a call to genocide. They're the Marxists who have aligned themselves with Muslims, not smart enough to realize that Islam is in every way the antithesis of who they are and what they espouse. It's just the total degradation of human intelligence is what we're witnessing. And so my dilemma in social media is that very few people are sufficiently informed, rational, and motivated to process this message. But fortunately, God has been very clear, telling me I should not be frustrated by this. Because what he has said is that his people aren't going to listen until their backs are up against the wall and they have no other option during the time of Israel's troubles. Exceedingly clear. He states it emphatically in Hosea and in Yirmiyah, that if not for this 7-year period that we are less than a year from entering, where Jews are so hated worldwide, and that Muslims are so aggressive as are Marxists in their destruction, that there is no longer any ruse that they're going to be protected by their politician or by their rabbis or by their culture or by anyone else, and that death lurks at every corner with no chance whatsoever that the IDF or a politician or a rabbi is going to prevail. A number will finally be receptive to Yah's message and be willing to change. Now, it's interesting that God said when he was speaking of Israel and Yehudah, he says, even if they were to have acknowledged and confessed that they have been religious and therefore wrong, and thereby estranging themselves from me, it wouldn't have mattered. And when I first read that, I said, why would God say that? Well, the answer is quite simple. Simply acknowledging that you're wrong, confession, if you would say, as they would say in religious terms, doesn't get you anywhere. I mean, it might be considered half of the first step that we take to be part of the covenant. The first step, the prerequisite, is to walk away from religion and politics. And when you acknowledge that you're wrong because you've been misled by religion and politics, That isn't walking away from it. That's just simply acknowledging that, well, yeah, it did me in. It led me astray. You still have to disassociate from it. Then that's the first step, but that's only the first step. Then you have to trust and rely on Yahweh, which you can't do until you come to know him and know what he said. That's why these books are all available for you free at yadayah.com, all 35 of them. And then after that, you have to walk to God to allow him to perfect you, which means you need to understand that the path is through Pesach, Matzah, and Bakurim, and that enables Shabuw'ah and Towrah, and then Towrah enables Corporeal, which leads to Sukkah. And need to know what those days represent, when they have and will transpire, who is fulfilling them, why, when, where. All of that needs to be known so that you can walk to God and allow him to perfect you. And then after all of that, he is saying, beyond that, you need to be exceedingly close in your focused observation, examination, and comprehension of the very terms and conditions of the covenant, so that you understand what it is that I'm offering you and what I expect in return. And even then, you need to accept the sign of the covenant, which is circumcision. All of those things have to happen. And this is a lot to ask of people who won't even say God's name, who won't acknowledge that Dowd is the Messiah and Son of God or the Savior, not even the returning King. And so what's going to happen in the end is that very few will be part of the Shabuw'ah and Towrah harvests, such that on the Shabat of Towrah, the 24th of September of 2033, Yahweh is going to bring every potential candidate that is Jewish or Goyim from around the world into Jerusalem, so that their religious and political guilt of having been misled, but not being overtly religious or political and being part of promoting either of those two deceptions. Therefore, it's only those who are guilty of being misled as opposed to misleading, crimes that are not of commission, that will be purged so that they can enter the time of our return to Eden. This is God's plan. And we're just not going to, according to God, see any significant movement or change from Israel until that time. And the other thing I want to make perfectly clear, having just translated again Hosea and Yirmiah, God is explicit. He has left Israel. He's not paying attention to Israel. He is not helping Israel. He is not listening to any prayers. He is not supporting Israel. He has no current affiliation with Israel at all. And he is not returning until Yehudim begin to return to him. So that's your reality. Now, in this particular case, the Mikael was introduced by Gabriel Dowd as the Palmoni, the one who will work in this regard to save Israel in the end. And he is speaking, and he has been revealing something that I have long known. As Yahweh's Choder and Dowd's herald, I am the adversary, if you will, of the adversary. And while I will allow him to bludgeon my body, Bashar, on Towrah as the Adam of Parah, per Yahweh's instructions, it will be Satan's undoing. And in so doing, I will rise and he will fall. Therefore, I will purge the adulterous woman, that is the remnant of Israel, so that Yehudim are prepared for Yahweh's return. And as a result, the devil is done. The moment that deed is accomplished, it's over for him. Yom Kippurim happens. God's not returning to the earth with Hasatan present. And he can return the moment that the adulterous woman, the religiosity of Israel, is purged. You can put a fork in him, so to speak. Between now and then, Satan will remain a paradox. While he has the title adversary, he seeks to be worshipped as if he were the Son of God. While he is intelligent, the religious and conspiratorial have him squandering his time manipulating the meaningless lives of those who are particularly stupid. He is light, albeit surrounded by darkness. He is immoral, and yet no one is deadlier. And I should have said that he is immortal. Satan can't be killed. That's why he goes to Sheol. He is immortal, and yet no one is deadlier. Knowing the truth, he is programmed to deal in deception. Here, Yahweh reminds us that the adversary can be a brilliant strategist. While he knows no signs of it in the Quran, and while he is committed to promoting all manner of fallacies in the New Testament, Satan was once described as crafty and cunning, just as his corporeal manifestation is in this case. But he's been sufficiently clever such that the average schmo, having been dumbed down by political jargon, religious rhetoric, tantalizing tweets, and conspiratorial theories, well, is easily hoodwinked, mesmerized by him. At a time with disinformation and errant reporting, liberal nonsense, and academic, political, religious indoctrination, he is going to outwit the world before most climb out of bed. It will be so bad that those who accuse others of serving Satan are actually worshiping him. Hillel ben Shakar, embodied within the bellicose and duplicitous Trump, will put on quite a show. He will continue to confuse and comically mislead many, taking them further away from God by pretending to be God. Promising to save them, he will damn them. He will embroider evil in velvet threads. And yet, Trump ought not be able to beguile and betray anyone, since his ambitions are so clearly stated and unambiguously outlined by Yahweh through Yahsha'yah and Daniel, even with his own hand through Ezekiel. And yet the world continues to lap up his lies as if they were lemonade, at least up to the point his toxins debilitate and kill them. The world is headed to a nuclear confrontation. It isn't going to be pretty. Total economic collapse. The great betrayer will claim to be the world's savior. And while speaking of life, he will exterminate and annihilate friend and foe in an orgy of death. Claiming that God spared his life when the bullet grazed his ear and claimed another, we now know that it was Satan's doing. As proof, imagine promoting that moment as Trump does with his fist salute, knowing that it cost two men their lives. Clearly, narcissists have no empathy. For Satan, even during his most glorious and goriest moment atop the mount, nothing will be sufficient or satisfying. Without concern or compassion, he will destroy countless billions of lives, while corrupting and curtailing much of human existence, all as Satan seeks to obliterate what God cherishes most. In the end, it's going to be a referendum on replacement theology. Which God is real? Which people matter? Who is the Messiah and King? Whose universe is it, anyway? Who's right? Who's wrong? The answer for a depopulated world in rubble is that the hand of the adversary's apostle will be broken, and his influence will seek. The Sharim, the prince of the greatest of kings, will ultimately have done his job. Towrah will enable Corporeal so that we can celebrate Sukkah. And with that, all is right in the universe. We have God's stamp of approval on this. And the vision, the sight, the ability to see the clear patterns presented in a comprehensible manner of the ensuing period of darkness in the evening, of the night of noxious foreigners, including Arabians, and the gloom resulting from weaving many threads together, and the dawn of a new day, this time of enlightenment to reflect and be contemplative, particularly regarding the bull, the morning of increasing light, a new tomorrow, to consider what can be observed at the end of darkness as a result of this bull, which, for the benefit of the relationship, Asher, he has declared and promised, is reliable and true about him and about you, such that this will all be fulfilled. Seal by disguising, choose to shut and make unrecognizable, indiscernible, the revelation for a very long time. Daniel, my God, judges and vindicates. 8:26. The ensuing darkness would ooze out of Babylon, the land of integrated and institutionalized religion and governance. Its toxicity would be consumed by the Persians who swallowed them, and then it would spread far and wide through the world by the Macedon king who imposed his will by brute force and a sea of blood. Interestingly enough, this rendition of the sweeping prophecy bypasses the lightless soul of Imperial Rome and her church and transitions directly to the dark heart of the final beast, corporeal manifestation of Satan's spirit. Subtly, perhaps, this may suggest that some of those who terrorized the world during the time of trouble will emerge from the Byzantine and Eastern Orthodox Church. After all, it was through the villainy of Constantine, Eusebius, and Theodosius that Imperial Rome became the Roman Church, shaped Europe and America. And while there will be a long night of noxious foreign usurpers acting badly, the bull will reign in a new day, a new dawn. He will bring the light for the benefit of the relationship. And in the presence of that light, there is no darkness. That is how and why the revolting one will meet his demise. In the flames, Yahweh ignites, surrounding that bull, the Adamah Parah. It is unlikely the Jews would have benefited from these insights as they dealt with the Babylonians, the Persians, the Greeks, the Romans, and their churches, and also the politics and the countries that grew out of them. Even if they could make sense of them, it wasn't going to affect their lives. I say this because they remained estranged from Yah. Therefore, they were sealed for our time. In fact, in another place, we are specifically told that they would not be unsealed or understood until the final witness arrived on the cusp of the time of troubles. And even then, it would take 24 years of diligently studying the Torah and the prophets before we beheld enough of God's overall plan to see how these exacting pieces complete the picture that God has painted for us. And so now, on the cusp of our Messiah's return, our King, the very Son of God, our Savior, Dowd, with Yahweh, we are finally at long last prepared to solve this puzzle. Therefore, Gabriel, or his Bashar, his herald, Michael, instructed Daniel to disguise what he had seen, such that the resulting imagery would be unrecognizable for a very long time. It would not be until the king's representative was equipped after 100,000 years, or 100,000 hours of study. Some 25,000 pages of insights to prepare him to solve the mystery that has long eluded the religious. Should you wonder why it wasn't until after 24 years and 34 books that I have finally sought to fulfill this mandate? As a matter of fact, it is in the 36th book now that I am sharing these, a book that I am just now completing and that I wrote specifically for the Yahweh blog, where all of these answers came together. The puzzle was finally framed correctly, every piece put in its proper place. And it's just now that I am fully able to appreciate the wide range of implications of Towrah and the role the bull plays, and of Dowd's 3 lives, the life of the Ram of God, that I finally know enough to resolve the conundrum of stilted language and bizarre imagery. And even then, this has been an enormous challenge with many unexpected twists and turns along the way. Before one is prepared to translate and explain such enigmas, he or she must first become familiar with mankind's history, how empires and institutions have conspired to harass Jews, the nasty consequence and the ambitions of Satan. To understand Daniel, we must be guided by Isaiah. And even then, to fully appreciate what Satan is trying to achieve and with whom, the demons lurking in the dark shadows of Ezekiel must be exorcised. We must also become familiar with the long tapestry of God's story and appreciate how it is developing up to this point, especially cognizant as to how it ends. And we must recognize how Satan has manifested himself and directed people's attention away from God through Judaism, Christianity, and then Islam, which puts me in a very unique position because I'm the only person to have written 13 volumes to excoriate, eviscerate those 3 religions. Prophecy pertaining to this period of time is alluring. It's indeed tantalizing, such that it will entice an audience. But they draw someone in before they have something meaningful to offer, and that is actually a distraction. And the only thing worth offering is an accurate introduction to Yahweh, along with the things which matter: his guidance, covenant, invitations, people, and son. And so when I share these details with you, it is only to draw your attention to these things that are set apart unto Yahweh. As a general rule, I have found that there is less teaching associated with future predictions than with past assessments. God reveals his purpose, his nature, and plan throughout the prophetic landscape, but less so with those associated with the last days. The reason, I suspect, is that the hope for those attempting to outlive the beast is to return to the basics, becoming fluent in the Torah, the covenant, and the invitations. Yahweh's core message is substantially more vital than the benefit of recognizing the adversary and his machinations. There is, however, an inference here worth considering. Most of what Daniel saw dealt with the rise and fall of empires and institutions, which are relatively easy for us to study and assess, particularly the Greeks, the Romans, and their church. By contemplating the commonality among them and associating these affinities with the ambition of the adversary, we discover why Yahweh has asked us to disassociate from religion and politics, and doing so before engaging in the covenant. By recognizing that which God says is bad for us and acknowledging the things that are good for us, we live longer and enjoy more fulfilling lives. That is the very purpose of repurposing the tree of knowledge of good and evil, which is the summation of these books. That is what they provide: access to the tree of knowledge, so that you would know what is good and what is bad, beneficial and harmful, right and wrong. And only then can you recognize and have access to the tree of lives, of which David is the ultimate branch. Today, as we approach the impending demise of the world as we have known it, and near the period of trouble, there is very little time left to awaken a sufficient number of Yehudim to properly greet Yahweh and Dode upon their return. And I don't want Israel to disappoint God. And the best way to ensure that this does not happen is to encourage God's people to listen before it's too late. Unraveling Daniel after nearly 2,600 years may be sufficient to garner their attention, especially when acknowledging that Dode is speaking for himself as Gabriel throughout Daniel 9 when addressing Hamashiach. That in itself should be an alluring prize, the greatest discovery in human history. With all of the lies swirling around the Magog War, Armageddon, the Antichrist, and the apocalypse, even the myth of a third temple among Christians and conspiratorialists, even Messianic Jews, such nonsense will drown out the truth to a degree that those who need it most won't listen. And now, in retrospect, this assessment of Daniel would have been premature if I had not completed Azab, separation, and its prophecies regarding Yahweh's long intermission away from his people, and how it began in the Torah, especially as chronicled in Numbers 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 20. All good things come in their time. Between now and Yah's return, while the darkness will continue to be depressing, God's light remains available to those who seek him. What we have witnessed and will experience is indeed appalling, and yet we are fast approaching the ultimate time of enlightenment. Well, I thank you for listening. It's been my pleasure to bring this Shabbat edition of the Yahweh blog here from our library studio. Thank you, Rich, for being here for us. And Leah has come back in. You even have a microphone on now, Leah. If I'd only known that, I would have taken a breath.
Yes, well, you were quite verbose there. At one point, I thought you were talking about the Cheeto McTaco tits, and then we end up with the bull. So, yeah, Israel, if you haven't figured it out, the antidote to the snake is a bull.
Indeed. The antidote for the snake that is Allah.
Mm-hmm.
To resolve the issue of Muslims wanting to destroy you, is the bull that has been called to stamp them out. It is the reason that I have written the 5 volumes, 4,200 pages of goddamn religion, of which this is just volume 3 of that book. Read this, you'll know your enemy. You'll know what the bull was called to stamp out. But in addition to that, you've had an enemy that has been more oppressive of you than Muslims. Christian New Testament demonizes Jews. It is the most anti-Semitic tome that actually inspired the Holocaust. You need to know what I know about the myth of Jesus Christ and how the rabbis enabled the robbing of Jews of their Messiah. There are 5 volumes of this as well. And then, just to make certain we don't leave Judaism
no stone left unturned,
untouched, I've written the 3 volumes of Babel to explain exactly how Judaism was concocted to rob Jews of their relationship with Yahweh. And then on top of that, there are over 25 volumes that explain who Yahweh is, reintroducing him by name, sharing with you exactly what he is offering and expecting in return, as well as for the first time, revealing that the very Son of God, the Messiah, our former and returning King, and our Savior who fulfilled Pesach, opening the door to life, who enabled the promise of matzah, carrying our guilt into Sheol to perfect us, and then allowing us to join him as part of God's family, the Bakor, firstborn, observing firstborn children, Bakurim. He is Dod, David.
The one, the only.
The one and only, the very Son of our God, his most beloved. It is the greatest story ever told. It is a love story, and it revolves around God's great love for his Son and his desire to have a family, which was enabled by his Son.
Mm-hmm. And he is looking for a bride for his Son.
Yeah, the whole purpose of the story of the adulterous woman and of the sacrifice of the Adam of Perah, Numbers 5 and Numbers 19, is manifest on Towrah. Mm-hmm. With the sacrifice of the Adam of Perah, because the Adam of Perah purges the adulterous woman, which is the religious nature of Israel, of her religious guilt, so that she is prepared and cleansed to be seen in Dod's presence and in Yahweh's, and because David wants his people back. And so she is the bride of the king. And that is God's story as he is presenting it to us. Brilliant, simple, elegant, drawn by God on a human scale. And he has delineated the players, their purpose, and this plan very clearly throughout his Torah and prophets, and it is our great pleasure to bring it all to you. Again, thank you for listening to this edition of the Yahweh blog as we come to you in this Shabbat in the first week of September 2025. Good day.